Hi guys, my name's John and I'm a trained veterinarian and biologist, and today we're talking about career paths into working with brown bears, with a special focus on the world's rarest bear, the Gobi grizzly. My guest is Dr. Andreas Zadrosa, a professor at the University of Southeastern Norway, and also a former council member of the International Association of Bear Research and Management. So what can you expect in the next half hour? This is not a natural history documentary, nor is it a making of kind of film about how wildlife documentaries are made. Instead, what we'll present is a possible career path if you want to work with bears. It's an interview in which I ask the questions I wish I'd asked 35 years ago when starting my own wildlife career. And before we go any further, I would like to thank my subscribers. Without you, there would be no channel, so thank you very much. Working with brown bears and living the dream looks like this. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome. The channel will deal with specific jobs with specific species of wildlife. Today the subject is working with brown bears. I find it helps to focus on an individual species, so we'll focus on the subspecies of brown bear called the Gobi grizzly. The Gobi bear evolved between 5.3 and 2 million years ago. We're now in a 6th mass extinction event. There are only an estimated 30 to 40 individual Gobi bears extant today, and all are in the wild. They are critically endangered and the rarest bear in the world. They are the only desert-dwelling subspecies of bear. Andreas, how would you describe Gobi bear conservation today?
It's a necessity. It is politically very important in Mongolia. It may be, from a conservation point of view, it may be little bit, maybe too many different actors be working in the not most coordinated way, but there's a lot of people with very good intentions, and the Gobi bear definitely is a species of major importance for the Mongolians. That's maybe a nice short summary of what's going on.
Conservation scientists have many management tools for managing endangered species in their toolbox. An important one is captive breeding, used extensively in bird conservation. I wanted to know if captive breeding had been considered for the Gobi bear. Are there any conservation captive breeding projects for it, Andreas?
No, and luckily not. And I can tell you shortly why I'm saying luckily not, because in order to do some captive breeding, which has been proposed, not the least by the Chinese, who had big success with the panda, but with the Gobi bears, you have around maybe 30, 40 individuals left. And if you remove those from the wilderness, right, you especially if you remove the last females that are out there, then the population really is doomed. And living in the Gobi Desert, those bears need a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, which they won't obtain in captivity. And also the young bears won't learn the necessary skills to survive in the Gobi Desert. They won't learn that in captivity. So I think the much better solution is to keep the bears in the wild and protect their habitat and the bears in the habitat. I don't think captive breeding is a good idea for Gobi bears.
That being the situation, Andreas, what careers does that produce working with Gobi bears?
That's that's an interesting question. Maybe a lot of unemployed biologists. Well, what career? So I'm not sure you can make a career working in Gobi bears, but you can certainly make a career as a researcher working on bears. So, as if you're lucky enough to happen to work for Gobi bears on Gobi bears for a little while, then well, lucky you. I wouldn't bet my career on just working with Gobi bears. You know, you may be out of job in maybe 20, 30 years actually.
And Andreas, what do you do?
Okay, what I do? Well, I'm a professor in ecology, wildlife ecology at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. That's what it's called. And so what I did was the way I obtained this position. I did my PhD on brown bears working in Europe with the Scandinavian Brown Bear Research Project, and have been working with brown bears since, well, actually I started working on brown bears before my PhD, so I've been working with brown bears since the early 1990s, so like a millennia ago. So, and that has culminated in eventually in a professor position at the university, and I'm lucky enough to still be able to work with bears. And the beauty of the thing is that we, in the Scandinavian Brown Bear Research Project, we have a long-term database, you know, which have data of 30, 40 years of demographic, GPS, genetic data on brown bears. You know, it's a treasure trove that never ends in terms of data and publications. So I'm in relation to bears, I'm really lucky.
And Andreas, do you do it for personal satisfaction, professional recognition, or the money?
I, I think people working at university in Europe, if you do it for the money, you're just not very smart because you're not making money. So that would be a bad choice working at the university for money. Um, it has been ever since I can think, since I was a small kid, I always wanted to become an animal researcher. And that has always been my major interest, my major passion. And I was lucky enough to make it into a professional job later on. It's definitely not for the money, I can tell you that. And you asked us about personal recognition. Of course, I mean, it is nice to get some recognition. But again, if you are working on wildlife and hope to gain a lot of personal recognition, you're in the wrong business, buddy.
And Andreas, for somebody who wants to be you, how did your career develop?
From since I was a little child, I always wanted to become an animal researcher. After I studied at school, I also spent a year abroad as an exchange student in Alaska. This was the first time when I really met bears in the wild. Then I came back. I graduated from high school. I'm Austrian, so I graduated there. Then I went to study biology because I was hoping that will allow me to work with mammals. I always wanted to work with mammals. And well, the problem was that people at the University of Vienna at that time didn't work very much with mammals, but they worked mainly with insects and flowers and, stuff that's nice, but it wasn't really my passion. So, what at that time, what you could do in Austria, you could design your own studies. You design your own study program. It was called irregular studies. And I'd heard from someone that he did that. And then nothing really stopped me from designing my own study program which I then called Wildlife Ecology and Wildlife Management, which was a combination of three different universities: the University of Natural Resources in Vienna, the Biology University, and the Veterinary University. So I picked courses from all three universities, and it had to be approved by all three universities plus the ministry at that time. It took me about 2 years to push it through, but I managed. and then was able to become really, a wildlife biologist also in title. An interesting thing on the side today, actually, this study exists in Vienna. They modeled, I know the people that did it, and they modeled it based on my initial program. But okay, I finished studying this in Vienna, and during the time, I tried to connect with as many large mammal projects that I could with. Basically, I went and visited projects, and I visited a wolf project in Romania, a lynx and a bear project in Slovenia, but also a bear project in Scandinavia, in Sweden. And this is then after I finished, I really wanted to work with bears, and this was then I was lucky enough to reconnect them with the Scandinavian Bear Project, and was able to pick up a PhD. And from there on, PhD, postdoc, and I got eventually, after a couple of years, having very little money, I ended up with a professor position.
And when you're in the Gobi Desert, Andreas, what is your most treasured possession in your field kit?
Given that there is no water and you can't really have a shower for 3, 4, 5 weeks, it's actually, this baby wipes that you give yourself a kind of a hobo shower. So that's a thing of beauty after a couple of days in the desert and sweating. That's my favorite, the most treasured possession I have in the Gobi Desert.
The baby wipes.
The baby wipes, yes. As silly as it may sound.
Do you have a sample of one that you can show us?
No, sorry, it's just standard baby wipes from the store. Get the scented ones, then you don't need deodorant either.
Brilliant. And Andreas, what skills do you need to be a Gobi bear specialist?
Skills that I need to start working with wildlife. It's passion for wildlife. I'm not sure really you need major skills, but you need a lot of passion, a lot of stubbornness, because it's being able to work with wildlife and making career in wildlife is mainly about really, being really wanting to do it, and trying to overcome all obstacles of being very few jobs, no money, and so on, and eventually ending up with it. What I tell students, the three things that I'm looking for in students, I can tell you that would like to do a PhD with me, working on Scandinavian bears or Gobi bears or other wildlife. It's always the same thing for me when I look for students. It's three things. The most important for me is your statistical or GIS knowledge on a computer. Are you able to analyze data? And that's the most important thing. That's for scientists nowadays, I think that's the biggest, the most important skill that you can have. Being fluent in statistics, in GIS applications, and being able to connect data, large scale data analysis. This is the alpha and omega nowadays, I think. The next thing is, do you speak and write good English? So being able to speak, just a normal conversation, that everybody manages that, but being able to write and being not afraid to write good English. So that's real important. And the third is, do you already have some publications to show that you're able to pull it off, actually? So when I look for PhD students, those are the three main skills. In terms of field work, okay, well, you shouldn't be a totally stranger to the field, but most people that want to do a PhD or a master's in biology, they come with a certain passion for the field. They like to be outside. That then they end up working in an office, of course. But so this is the being able to not get lost in a field or in a forest or in a desert. That's kind of almost a basic requirement. But beyond that, it's most of all your statistical, your computer skills, your English skills, and your publication experience. Yeah.
And for somebody who has a passion to work with bears, Do you need a degree?
A degree helps you to stay in business, I would think. I think if you wanna work with bears and just be a volunteer, sometimes definitely don't need a degree. I mean, there's lots of projects where you can go and help and excuse me, and participate. But if you really want to make a career out of it, I think yes, you need a degree. And honestly, I think maybe not so much in North America, but in Europe, you probably need a PhD.
Right. And uh, how can people work on those skills that they need? So English, um, statistical fluency,
Hmm.
and the ability to write well. How can they acquire those skills?
Well, it's really as simple as learning it by doing it mainly. University education really gives you more or less all you need. I mean, most master's programs are nowadays in English. And I mean, if I, for example, look at Europe, uh, I mean, I'm from Austria, work in Norway, but we have master's programs in English, and also a lot of the foreign students that come, you need to take the TOEFL test, right? And the English is usually pretty good, and learning, writing skills is just a matter of practice. And there's actually a couple of very nice books out there, even old books, on writing well. And there's a couple of good books that you can read that really help you with your writing skills. But at the end of the day, it's just learning it by doing it. And in a way, it's the same with the stats. I would say pick a program. Nowadays in ecology, usually R, and just suck the knowledge into your brain and try to become fluent. And this is really for me more important than writing. And writing skills nowadays with AI and the help of AI, it's really easy to take a text and make good English. Ask AI, please help me to write this in good English. That's not a major problem anymore. Also, in terms of R skills or statistical skills, now there's a lot of coding help you can get from AI, but you really need to know what you want to do, and you need to make sure that AI or whatever Google Master, Mr. Google, gives you the correct answer. So with statistics, again, you have to learning it by doing it. There's just no way around it. And my suggestion would be go beyond the classes at university. University classes are the basis and the basics, but then there's so much you can learn online. There's so many courses you can take. There's free online courses. There's so many online tutorials. Try to go the extra mile, and because that will give you an advantage during job interviews. And this is, really your technical skill set is your currency as a scientist, I think.
Mhm. And as for people going into the field, into the Gobi for the first
Yeah.
time, what do you like them to, what skills, Andreas, do you like to see them pick up within the first 1 or 2 months of being in the field?
Well, okay. So in the Gobi, you will never be alone. So you always work in teams, and in our case, there's always some of the Gobi National Park rangers along who really know the Gobi. So people skills maybe is really important. Don't go anywhere without water. Don't go anywhere without a small emergency kit. And in terms of skills, I think I'm not sure if you need any specific skills. It's just be comfortable outside. Don't be afraid of big ugly spiders or scorpions or those little creepy things. But other than that, be I think what's really important, that the skill to be excited about new things, excited about nature, and appreciating nature in all its forms and shapes and weird things. That's maybe the biggest skill, and not everybody has it, and not everybody can learn it actually.
Mm. Being a naturalist, you mean? Being able to identify wildlife?
That certainly helps, and it will, you know, put you, it will gain you some credit with the Mongolians, or whoever you're out with, you know, that you know your way around, you know, what plants, what animals, whatever it is. So that will certainly give you a good rep and improve your communication with those people. Yes,
Mm. What do the locals that are helping out on the project, what language do they speak, Andreas?
they speak mainly Mongolian. A couple of them do speak English, so you always need a translator actually. And there's a lot you can do with sign language and but still at the end of the day when it comes to science you soon meet your limits with just gestures and sign language. So we always have translators along, or actually we don't really have any designated translators, but we have biologists that speak really good English, and without them it would be really difficult. Mongolian is just a totally different language, and you have absolutely no idea what they say. So it's yeah, you need a translator.
Do you know how to say hygienic wipes in Mongolian?
No, sorry. I'll pick that up next time. Good question.
No. Andreas, what issues would you like to see addressed in Gobi bear conservation in the next 5 Gobi bear generations?
The next 5 Gobi bear generations. Well, I think the biggest challenge for Gobi bears, in general, I think the Gobi Desert is the enormous amount of rare earths, minerals, and so on that are available in Gobi. Sorry, in the Gobi, in Mongolia in general, but especially in southern Mongolia and in and around the Gobi Desert, and the never-ending hunger of our world for these natural resources, and China is really pushing for an exploitation of these resources with all political means, and China is pumping a lot of money into Mongolia. And on the one hand, I can really understand the Mongolians that are in terms of their economic power, and they are far behind many of the neighboring countries, definitely far behind China. So I can understand that they would like to increase or improve the economy, and the economy at the state level, the economy at the personal level. At the same time, what really surprised me very positively the first time I came to Mongolia was the deep appreciations Mongolians have for the Gobi Desert and the Gobi Bear, and the deep connection they still have to this landscape, which I think is in terms of Gobi Bear conservation is the biggest strength, but the biggest issue and biggest problem is, in my opinion, really the exploitation of natural resources and all the mining and road development that comes along with that. And just recently there was a big push from China, but also from Mongolia side to build a couple of new roads along the Gobi, through the Gobi, which would have been a real major issue. Luckily, that has been stopped. I'm not sure for how long, but currently the issue has been put to rest, not the least due to the Gobi bear and the importance of the Gobi bear for the Mongolians. But in the long run, it's still dangerous in the long run. And I think really, economic development in Mongolia will go a long way of trying to, if they find different ways for economic development, will probably help, stop or prevent the development of the Gobi Desert and mining and this open pit mines and these kind of things, which are really a problem from a conservation point of view.
Wow. And into the long term, Andreas, what jobs will be generated with Gobi bears?
That's a challenging question. What jobs will be generated with Gobi bears? So there's certainly, let's not just talk about Gobi bears, but I think, let's talk about the Gobi in itself, the Gobi ecosystem. There certainly is the potential, which is already, they've already started with it, for ecotourism. And there's ecotourism companies, traveling in the Gobi. Of course, that always also comes with additional conservation challenges, but also leaves conservation dollars, right? So, in terms of conservation in itself, there is good NGOs can make in at least in Mongolia, they can survive with focusing on the Gobi Desert, and so conservation NGOs. But it's not really generating a lot of jobs. But I think probably the biggest potential is in Mongolia in general, and especially in the Gobi Altai region in southern Mongolia and western Mongolia. The ecotourism, eco-friendly tourism certainly could generate some jobs and generate some revenues. And Mongolia is such an incredible country. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating from the culture. It's fascinating in terms of history. Just think about it. I mean, the Mongolian Empire, Genghis Khan, so still is the largest land empire that ever existed on Earth. And that was 1,000 years ago. So it's the history is fascinating, the culture is fascinating. They have beautiful people with a beautiful sense of humor. They have a very interesting, sometimes a bit challenging kitchen or food, but the landscape is gorgeous, and I think Mongolia, if they make some smart decisions down the road, they can really, in terms of tourism and ecotourism, they could be an ecotourism paradise. I think it's a gorgeous country.
Somebody who's thinking of doing either an undergraduate or a master's degree project or even a PhD thesis, where do our knowledge gaps lie with Gobi bear ecology?
Okay, the knowledge gaps that I see currently with Gobi bears is probably we have a very small population. There seems to be it appears to be skewed towards males, so there appear to be relatively few females. So really understanding if this population skew is a true thing or if it's just due to our monitoring techniques. That's probably really important. Reproduction in the Gobi bears is poor. I mean, it's a desert living bear, and they survive mainly on wild rhubarb and some pellets from feeding stations. So they eat very little meat. So they reproduce every 4 and 5 years in a very small litter size. So understanding the reproductive cycle, and how you could boost this is probably really important, or at least how to maintain it. It's low, but at least how to maintain it and keep it going. Population, that's really important. And I think something that has been overlooked a little bit in the past, we have now a pretty good understanding of the genetic makeup. We are missing the females, but genetic monitoring seems to be working pretty well. But I think we really need to understand more of the food and food patterns and really the food sources that we survive on. They are very much reliant on a few oasis complexes that exist throughout the Gobi. And they eat very much wild rhubarb of all plant species. They have survived on that. But the Mongolians also have an artificial feeding program where they put out pellets. It's actually pellets for livestock, with vegetable pellets, basically vegetarian pellets, really, because the bears don't really eat meat. So that's kind of two things going on there. One is obviously you're building or you're developing a population that's very much reliant on these artificial feeding sites. Not sure if that's a good thing in the long run. But on the other hand, maybe these artificial feeding sites could be a potential source if you could increase nutrition and nutritive value. You could potentially improve reproduction, which you maybe you could create a kind of a bit more productive population core that could pump out more individuals that eventually increase again the distribution of Gobi bears. But the nutrition side I think is really important, and the reproductive side is really important, and would be good to get more knowledge. We really do understand how reproduction bears works, but the Gobi bear is a brown bear like no other bear. So it's really a cool little bear.
Do you have any nicknames for it when you're with the team in the field?
For the Gobi bear, well, the Mongolians call it Matsalai, which is the Gobi, means just the name of the Gobi bear in Mongolian. Most people there just say Matsalai.
Right.
And also most of us Westerners who are there eventually start adapting this term.
And Andreas, what about the literature? Are there any particular texts that future researchers need to look at? Are there any particular journals they need to follow?
Um, there is the problem is there's some older literature, but it's all in Mongolian, so it's not very accessible to Western researchers. There are a few papers out now, and I think the best papers are by a Mongolian. Well, now she finished a couple of years ago, but the Otbaya Tumendemberel is her name. And she produced papers really on the genetics of the Gobi bear. I think these are the highest quality papers that we have out there currently, and they will give you a good basic understanding of the Gobi bear population and the problems of the Gobi bear population and its genetic makeup. So this is, in my opinion, is currently the best available scientific literature on Gobi bears. There's a very good book on the Gobi bear written by an American journalist, which I can recommend. Of course, I forgot his name, but I can Google it. But that book is really good, and it's actually this describes the Gobi bear, and the journalist that accompanied the Gobi Bear project and its founder before I actually started to participate in the project. And it gives you a really good background and introduction to Gobi bears and the dangers they're facing, and actually a lot of, well, at least the student I mentioned, Otko Otbaya, it shows also up in the book. There's pictures, and it's a very good book.
Is that the one by Douglas Chadwick?
Yes, thank you, Doug. Of course, it's the book by Doug Chadwick. Yes.
Tracking the Gobi bear.
Yes, thank you. I'm a professor. I professor material. I keep forgetting things. So
no problem. Andreas, what about the conference circuit for somebody who aspires to study at the minimum brown bears or at best Gobi bears? What conferences should they be looking out for?
So what you really should do, you should become a member of the International Association for Bear Research and Management, bearbiology.org. And I recommend anyone interested in bears or wanting to work with bears, or any student that is already working with bears, go to the IBA conferences. The next one is this year actually in Italy, and it's a very nice group of people and researchers to meet. So the conferences in terms of size are somewhere between 200 and 400 people. And there are people from all over the world working on all 8 different bear species. And if you want to meet people working with bears, that's the place to be.
Fantastic. And Andreas, can you suggest a research project for somebody who wants to study either brown bears or Gobi bears?
Well, for Gobi bears, it used to be the so-called Gobi Bear project, the Matsalai project. It's currently in a little bit of a dormant state in terms of field work, but we do have students that work on data and produce papers, so that's very good. In terms of brown bears in Europe, I would suggest you either go to Poland or you go to Scandinavia, where I am, by coincidence. So the Polish brown bear project or the Scandinavian brown bear project. Slovenia has a very nice bear group that's is really productive, really good. Also, if you want, there's a couple of very, very good brown bear projects in North America. At least they used to be. Now that the interagency grizzly bear team and the what's it called, a lot of the bear researchers or a lot of the wildlife researchers got the boot with the current administration in the U.S. So the number of records has decreased. There's a couple of good university projects, for example, on Kodiak, working with Kodiak brown bears. These, in terms of brown bears, are probably the best addresses in the world.
Wow, fantastic. And Andreas, sadly, that's all we have time for, unless there's anything that you'd like to add.
Okay. If you want to work with wildlife, whatever it is, bears or deer or whatever, and you believe it's difficult to get a job, yes, it's difficult to get a job, but don't give up. I mean, it's some of the most rewarding things you can do to make your passion into a job. So go for it.
Brilliant, brilliant. Andreas, you are an ecologist with the University of Southeastern Norway. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal Channel, Professor Andreas Zadrosser.
Well, thanks for having me.